This is Business Therapy, healing businesses from the inside out with communication and emotional intelligence. My name is Diane Dye Hansen, management consultant, and with me is Christine Salvo, therapist, certified mediator, and certified hypnotist.
Good morning.
Good morning. So, I'm wondering how many people listening today have experienced a big life shift, a big life tragedy, and how you handled it. Today on the show, I have Chris Mistrick, who underwent a large transition and used it to create more empathy in his business, better value based selling, and deeper connection, making his clients the heroes of their own story. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thank you so much for having me, Diane and Christine. Love what you guys are doing and feel honored to be on with you today.
Well, thank you so much.
That's lovely. Thank you so much.
So I'm really interested to hear more about your story. And I know it's hard to talk about the life and tragedies, but as I like to call it, Crappertunity knocks on your door. And when you answer, sometimes it can be a little rough at first. So tell me about your tragedy.
Yeah, well, so it all started about 6 years ago. My wife of 10 years came home and told me that she was done with the relationship. And this was after years of fighting through some health issues and working through different things. We had three young daughters, all under the age of 6 at the time. And so when she left, it put me in a situation where I wasn't just struggling emotionally, but I also was struggling financially. She made more than half of the income for our household. So I had to pretty quickly figure out a way to provide for my three daughters as a single dad. And so through the suggestion of a friend, started selling myself as a web designer and began freelancing and probably had no business telling people that I was a web designer. But I knew I had to do something, and I knew that no matter what it took, I was going to figure something out. And so what happened was actually pretty miraculous. Within about 18 months, I had doubled the income of my full-time job, working when my kids were sleeping. So they'd go to bed at like 8, and I would stay up until midnight, sometimes 1 or 2 in the morning, designing websites for clients. And so found out that the tragedy that I had gone through had actually made me pretty equipped to relate to people in business, to figure out how to empathize with people on a level that I hadn't been able to had I not gone through the tragedy. And so did freelancing in my free time for a long time, and then decided not too long ago that I was ready to make the full switch and go full time into web design. And so now my full time job is I'm a UX designer, and my part time job is I help people figure out how to do what I've done. I'm trying to help people who are like me in a desperate situation, figure out how to provide for them and their family. So
okay, give me the before and after. So before your wife decides that she wants something else, and this divorce happens, and you're kind of scrambling and looking for the new way, and how am I going to support my family and my kids without half the income and all these things? And it's sounding to me like you got full custody. Is that correct?
Well, we're half and half.
Okay, so you guys did a 50-50.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's one thing clear.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, but I'm really kind of curious. So before you had this kind of this epiphany of like life is hard and we need to struggle, we need to help each other. That's that empathy piece. What were you like before? What was your personality like? What were you kind of missing that you have now?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that it's not like I was never an empathetic person before. I think that it, going through a divorce was the one thing in my mind that before it actually happened, that I thought, man, if I go through this, then that's it. That's the worst thing that could possibly happen to me as a person. And
Mm.
so going through that, it deepened my level of compassion and understanding and relating to people on a level of tragedy that I think I would not have been able to achieve had I not gone through it. And I think also, it took away a lot of judgmentalism from me.
Right.
Because before, I would have never said I was judgmental towards people who had been through a divorce.
Sure.
But, in the back of your head, you think, okay, there's probably something you could have done. Like there's that little piece. And then having gone through it and gone, I did everything I could, and so I think that gives you an ability to really see people on a new plane that, like I know for me, for sure, it did that. And I don't think I would have achieved that had I not experienced it.
So if divorce was the worst possible thing that could have happened to you, how do you feel about divorce now? I'm just a little curious.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would, it's the kind of thing I would never want anybody to go through,
Mm-hmm.
and would never wish it for anybody.
Yeah.
And would honestly say, if at all avoidable, make the effort. But now I understand, like, there definitely are worse things that could happen. And, I think if anything, it helped me to see that I'm a lot more resilient than I first thought,
Yeah.
and that puts business into perspective of, man, if I can make it through something like a tragedy of divorce or whatever, like I can get through a slow month in my business or a tight month in what I'm doing. And it gives you a level of grit that, like I think it's a little bit harder. You just question, like, can I go through this? Am I capable of persisting? And, it really answered a lot of questions about my own persistence and ability, I think, as well.
So you said that you part of your time you're a UX designer, and then the other part you're teaching people how to deepen empathy in business. So how do you deepen empathy in business? Is there a process?
Yeah, I mean, I always start out with first talking to people about um, who it is that they are serving. And a lot of people, they struggle with this idea of being salesy. Like getting on a call and thinking, like, I'm going to try to trick this person into giving me money, but understanding, like, nobody that does business that way stays in business for very long. And so you have to think of yourself as a servant to the person that you are helping. And if your service doesn't fit, then you serve them by saying, I'm not a good fit. Let me help you find somebody.
Oh, yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
it's finding the person that you want to serve better, and then thinking about it from their perspective. For instance, with web design, a lot of web designers will come at a client and say, okay, I know JavaScript and HTML, and I've been doing this for 20 years. And the client goes, I could care less. What they want to know is, how will what you do help me move forward with my company? And
Mm-hmm.
so you're looking at things like the problems that they feel, the pain points that they feel. You're looking at the answer beneath the answer. So, it's the old adage of, people don't buy a drill because they want to drill. They buy a drill because they want to screw a screw into the wall, and they don't even really want to put a screw in. They want to hang a picture, and they don't even really want to hang a picture. They want to be reminded of memories of their kids when they were 3 years old. It's going underneath the immediate simple answer to really understand where somebody's coming from, so that you can know how to best serve them.
I love that metaphor you just put. That was such a great visual of kind of working backwards and forwards. How long ago was this? How long ago was your divorce?
So it's 6 years ago now.
So 6 years ago this happened, but it's sounding to me like you're really maintaining stamina. Like that was a lesson that you're not going to let forget. So often our pain points or our tragedies, we feel them as long as it's uncomfortable. And then some of us have a tendency to quickly forget. So how have you
Yeah,
maintained this stamina and this kind of like energy of like, hey, I remember what that was like. I'm not gonna let myself go, forgive me for saying it, but like back to sleep, right? I'm not gonna let myself go back to sleep. I'm gonna keep this going. I'm gonna keep the lesson and I'm gonna use it. What's been your process?
sure. Yeah, well, you know, for me, it was a tragedy, but it was also a huge wake up call.
Mm-hmm.
And the tragedy was used for that purpose. I realized I'm not being as intentional with my career. I'm not being as intentional with my finances. I'm not being as intentional with the relationships that I have. And it shook me enough that I said, I never want to do this again. And to be honest, there's a little bit of dysfunction. There's a little bit of fear of, oh God, I can never allow myself to get in this situation where I'm this desperate for money.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would never advocate for, maintaining persistence based on fear, because I think that leads to a lot of dysfunction, um, in a lot of different areas. But I think more than anything, it helped me to clarify the why behind why I do things the way that I do. So the it's not me trying to make more money. It's me trying to leave a legacy for my daughters.
Yeah.
It's me trying to help people figure out how to level up in their own careers or in their own business. Because the motivation behind making an extra dollar, that dissipates really quickly. Like, find some stuff in your garage to sell and go sell it, and then you satisfy that motivation. But the motivation to help people long term, and not just leave behind a legacy for my kids, but my kids' kids and my kids' kids' kids, and setting up, telling my girls, like, you don't have to settle for a level of a career that you're dissatisfied in. Like, there are opportunities for you to learn. For instance, I was having a conversation with my oldest daughter, and we were in, like some retail cookie store, and she was saying how she wanted to work at the store one day, and I was like, well, hey, babe, why don't you think about maybe owning a store like this one day? And so helping her to see in a big, a bigger reality than just like you do a job and somebody pays you, some money, and then you go on about your day. Like, that really is the motivation that keeps me going.
Yeah, I think that's so important too. And it's the equivalent of the lemonade stand. When you're a kid, you have your lemonade stand, you have your little thing where you sell things. I know when I was a kid, I used to, and of course this is highly illegal these days, but I used to record songs off the radio. It's like, oh, my song, my friends want to hear ghost theme to Ghostbusters. So I'd sit and I'd wait until, because they used to announce what
Yep.
song
Yep.
would go on the
I
radio beforehand.
remember.
And said, oh, next up we have Ghostbusters. So I had my little finger on the record button on the tape, and I would record it, and then I'd charge them $1 for
That's
this
awesome.
recording of the song Ghostbusters. Now I know I'm like an early bootlegger and all, but it's still being an entrepreneur and finding kind of that thing that makes you just feel alive. And teaching
Yeah.
that to your daughters is so valuable. So you still have a full-time job are you a freelance UX designer, or are you working for a company?
I work for a tech company, so
Okay.
I'm a part of the team, and the reason for that is I'm a very relational person, and you know the idea of freelancing from my couch for 40 hours a week seems pretty tough. So becoming a part of the team was important to me, for sure.
Yeah, it makes all the difference in the world. But I love how you're able to take that little piece and instill it onto your children and have them have that little experience of, hey, I don't have to work at the candy store. I could own the candy store.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's very cool.
So you sound to me like the kind of guy that maybe does a little bit of reading or some personal growth kind of stuff. Am I wrong?
Oh man, I am an avid reader.
I,
Um,
I
uh,
could I could hear it in the things you're saying. What, give me a little snapshot here, kind of what feeds your fire, this idea of legacy and when you really started thinking about that.
yeah, for sure. Well, I'm a Dave Ramsey fan, and
Mhm.
he has books on legacy and leaving a legacy for your children. Also when it comes to finances, and that was a real pivotal turning point to see finances in that way for me, because for the longest time it's like I almost had a chip on my shoulder for struggling with money. Like like only the good people struggle with money. Like the people who don't struggle with money,
Oh, yeah.
you know,
I see that a lot. I see
Mhm.
that a lot. There's this block towards wealth, right? There's this kind of like idea of if I'm wealthy, I'm all of a sudden, fill in the blanks.
Mhm.
right?
Yep. Yep.
Absolutely,
Well,
yeah.
it's the blueprint, the money blueprint that T. Harv Eker talks about in his book Secrets of the Millionaire Mind. And we all are installed with this blueprint. So this new blueprint you're giving your children is based actually off of shifts you have installed in yourself post tragedy. So pre tragedy, you may have had a certain money blueprint, but then because you experienced a disruptive state, you needed to change that blueprint because it no longer serves you. But we are printed upon by everyone around us as we grow up. Poverty consciousness, for example.
Mhm.
Money does not come easily or freely. You have to work hard for it. You have to work a lot of hours for it. You have to exhaust yourself for it.
Money does not grow on trees,
Money does not grow on
which
trees.
I actually have figured out that's actually a fact.
you know,
I've explored many forests looking for the money tree, and it has eluded me.
climbing the tree looking for the money. Although tree trimmers would say money does grow on trees.
Oh, there we go.
True.
There we go.
Very true. So it just depends on your perspective. But I think it's really great how the tragedy that you experienced actually created an internal shift, not just toward empathy, but toward your money wiring or even your ability to accomplish certain things. It made you stronger on a number of points. And I like how Christine kind of develop that baseline of, well, where were you before the divorce? Because it's really nice to see exactly how far you've come. So kind of revisiting that question, like what beliefs did you hold before the divorce that you do not hold now?
Yeah, well, I definitely don't think that money is evil. Yeah, and I think another part of the equation for what sustains me is that for me, I'm trying to make more so that I can give away more, so that I
Yeah.
can be the help that people were to me
Mhm.
when my wife left me, and friends would come over and buy dinners and help out and pitch in for daycare and all of that kind of stuff, and before the divorce, I think I had the mindset of, you know, if something is good is going to happen to me, it's going to come through some miracle, rather than by me intentionally going after something.
Mm-hmm.
And so when the rug was pulled out from underneath me, it became really clear I've got to do something, or it's going to be tough, and so that began the journey of realizing that I have more control over my fate, over my life than I once thought I did, and I still do think that there is a bit of luck. I'm a person of faith, so I think that there's definitely some divine intervention when it comes to my life. But I think that there's also a responsibility, a personal responsibility that for so long I had pushed to the side. That this tragedy was a wake up call to go. You need to get serious about the things that are happening in your life.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is exactly the path of the method that I created in my master's program at USC, the critical opportunity process, or Crappertunity, as I call it, as a more fun way of saying it. But we have a choice at these critical situations in our lives, at these critical moments. We have a choice. And one choice is to go into the downward spiral. We can deny, we can activate the ego. Oh, I'm a terrible man. Of course she divorced me, and down into the spiral we go. Or I was too good for her anyway. So we have a choice. Or we can go into awareness, consciousness, and humility. So we can go into the space of, okay, this happened. This happened. Here we are. Now what? I'm not going to puff myself up. I'm not going to deflate myself. I'm going to become fully aware of my 2 feet on the ground, and now I can take responsibility for that.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I was a little curious too for your process. We're talking about your business, but did you also kind of dive into some personal work as far as your relationships and the things that you don't want to repeat? Also with like single parenting, did you get any kind of counseling or help along the way?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. My first step was going to books, just because that's a welcome home, safe place for me. So there's one book by someone named Chris Valentin called "The Supernatural Power of Forgiveness,"
Oh, that's beautiful.
and so that was forgiveness for me, was, and still is, a process, obviously, but was pivotal for me not staying in what you reference as the downward spiral, of releasing, like, of course I felt wronged, of course I felt abused and misused, but letting that go and saying, okay, I'm going to now move on with my life. So reading was a huge part of it. I definitely got counseling. It's the kind of thing that um, you know, you need somebody to give you helpful perspective. So talk to multiple counselors, and then later on, when I decided that I was going to start looking for another relationship, I had to get counseling again, because I found myself sabotaging relationships
Awesome.
based on my past tragedy. So
Hmm.
I had to have somebody to talk through things and help me to see things in a better way, for sure.
Yeah, and I love how you put that too, because trauma and tragedy, it's a very personal experience, and it really doesn't take a whole heck of a lot to shock us out of our shells. A lot of times we think it has to be this catastrophic event, but little things, little things can really kind of make a change in our brain waves and our consciousness and how we think about things. And then we kind of get what I like to call it like a hair trigger. Like the first sign of danger, I shut down and I retreat and I want to crawl under the table and I want to hide my face under and I love that you really put it in that way that, hey, I noticed some behaviors, I noticed some things, and now I have to address that. So whether it's in your personal life or your professional business, it's not a one shot deal. It's going to be something you revisit. And whether it's I went into business for myself and it didn't do well and I'm afraid to do it again, but I have no other options, or I don't want to work for someone else, or my life has changed, I need more flexibility, you know, get the help, seek the help, read the books, do the things. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely would, and I would add, don't stop until you get the healing that you're after.
Mhm.
Because I think a lot of people have the tendency to go, I did counseling and it didn't work.
Yeah.
And,
Mm-hmm.
I went twice.
right, exactly. Like, okay, there are great counselors out there, and then there's some really bad counselors. And so you might have got a dud, okay? Like, you've got to give it another shot. And really, your emotional state is no one's responsibility but your own.
Right.
And so if you can't blame bad counselors for being dysfunctional, like, you've got to take responsibility and say, I'm not going to settle for a life that isn't whole, and whatever that takes, I'm up for the challenge.
Yes. Well, Chris, congratulations
Yeah.
on traveling the upward part of the spiral and using your tragedy to create more success than would have existed without it. I think
You are truly
that is
inspirational.
absolutely inspirational. And thank you so much for coming on Business Therapy.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure talking to
It
you,
was so great having you on.
Absolutely. This has been Business Therapy, healing businesses from the inside out through communication and emotional intelligence. I'm Diane Dye Hansen, management consultant.
And I'm Christine Salvo, therapist, hypnotherapist, and mediator.
Have a great morning.
Have a great day.